She married a human for peace, then he revealed a strength no alien had ever seen. Best HFY Stories. The twin suns hung low over the desert plains of Alaris Prime, casting long shadows across the golden sands. In the distance, the outlines of hover horses grazed beside tall, whistling windmills, their metal blades spinning slowly in the breeze. It was a quiet place, one that could easily have been forgotten by the wider galaxy. Yet today, it was the meeting point for a marriage that could change the future of two civilizations. Princess Kalea of the Zirian cluster stepped off the Starliner, her silver gown shimmering in the sunlight. Her antennae twitched slightly, betraying the mixture of excitement and nervousness she felt. Kayla had spent her entire life preparing for diplomacy. Every word she spoke, every expression she made, had been honed to perfection. And now, she was about to marry a human, a species her people had always considered primitive, to secure peace between the Zirians and humanity. As she descended the ramp, she caught sight of Elias Kane. He was leaning against a wooden railing on the porch of a small but sturdy homestead. His wide-brimmed hat shaded his sharp eyes, and the long duster he wore flapped slightly in the wind. He looked normal. Too normal, perhaps. Kayla had imagined humans as loud, strange creatures who relied on machines and brute force, but Elias seemed calm, patient, and completely at ease in the desert heat. Princess Kyla? His voice was steady, warm, and without ceremony, yet carried a quiet authority. Yes, she replied, bowing slightly. You must be Elias Kane. He offered a small smile. That's me. Welcome to Alaris Prime. The words were simple, but Kayla felt a flicker of surprise. He wasn't reciting protocol. He wasn't performing some galactic ceremony. He was speaking like a man who simply existed in his world. Something about that simplicity was disarming. As they walked across the sandy yard toward the house, Elias began explaining the homestead. These are hover horses, he said, gesturing to the sleek floating animals grazing nearby. They're mostly gentle if you respect them. And that windmill over there, he pointed to one of the towering structures spinning slowly, powers most of the house. It's old tech, but it works. Kayla listened, carefully noting every detail. But more than the facts themselves, she was fascinated by the ease with which Elias shared them. There was no pretension, no attempt to impress with technical jargon. He trusted her to understand, to see value in things that weren't flashy or high-tech. Inside the homestead, the air was cool and smelled faintly of fresh bread and herbs. The interior was simple but functional, decorated with objects that spoke of a life lived fully in the desert. Kayla felt a strange mix of relief and intrigue. This wasn't a palace, and Elias wasn't a typical noble. Yet everything about him radiated competence, calm, and strength. Over dinner, they talked more about themselves. Kayla spoke of her people, the rigid protocols of the Zirian cluster, and the expectations placed upon her. Elias listened carefully, nodding at the right moments, asking questions that were thoughtful but not intrusive. When he spoke of his life, of taming hover horses, fixing old tech, and navigating the harsh desert, Kayla realized something remarkable. Elias was confident, not because of his lineage or wealth, but because of his knowledge, his curiosity, and his ability to adapt. By the time the twin suns set, painting the horizon in shades of pink and purple, Kayla felt a shift in her perspective. She had married a human for peace, for duty, and for political necessity, but now she could see that humans, at least this human, were far more capable than her people had imagined. That night she stood on the porch, watching the stars emerge over the desert. The twin moons reflected in her eyes, and she thought of her home planet, with its grand halls and strict rules. She had always believed that strength came from technology, from intelligence, from control. But Elias's calm confidence, his hands-on knowledge, and the way he connected with his environment suggested something different, a quiet strength that required no machines or laws to prove itself. The next morning, Kayla awoke to the sound of Elias whistling as he worked outside. Curious, she followed him and found him repairing a small solar collector that had tilted during the night's wind. He noticed her and gave a quick smile. "Morning, Princess." Kayla hesitated, but then nodded. She had always been more comfortable in diplomatic chambers than with tools and machinery, but she wanted to understand this man who had so easily impressed her. He handed her a small spanner, and together they adjusted the panels. Kayla fumbled at first, her fingers unfamiliar with the weight and shape of the tools. But Elias guided her patiently, showing rather than telling. She began to see how humans, even in the simplest tasks, used ingenuity and persistence. Every adjustment, every small correction mattered, and it worked. By mid-morning, the solar collector was aligned perfectly, gleaming in the sun, and Kayla felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. "You learn fast," Elias said with a grin. "Most newcomers give up after a few tries." Kayla smiled. "I have a good teacher." They shared a laugh, and for a moment all the formality and duty melted away. Here, on a quiet desert homestead, with the twin suns rising over the horizon, Kayla saw a side of humanity she had never imagined. Resourceful, resilient, and endlessly surprising. Later that day, they visited the nearby trading post, a bustling hub of merchants, traders, and travelers from many planets. Kayla was struck by the diversity of life and the chaotic harmony of the place. While alien visitors often relied on rigid schedules and formal interactions, Elias navigated the crowd with ease, greeting people by name, resolving small disputes with humor and calm, and showing a natural understanding of others' needs. Kayla realized that what had seemed ordinary, his ability to read people, his improvisational skills, his quiet authority, was actually extraordinary. No alien she knew could manage a crowd like this without strict rules, advanced tech, or coercion. Elias did it with nothing but his instincts, his respect for others, and his confidence in himself. As the sun dipped low again, casting long shadows across the desert, Kayla began to understand the full scope of her situation. She had married Elias for peace, for political necessity, but the human she had married was unlike anything her people had ever encountered. There was a strength in him not of muscles or machines, but of mind, heart, and spirit, a strength that might very well redefine her understanding of power and capability. That night, as they rode hover horses back to the homestead under the star-filled sky, Kayla felt a sense of anticipation she had never known before. Tomorrow they would continue their work, navigating the delicate balance between human ingenuity and Xerian diplomacy. But tonight, she allowed herself a quiet hope that this marriage, born of necessity, could also be the beginning of something truly extraordinary. And somewhere deep in her chest, Kayla felt a spark of excitement, not just for the peace it might bring, but for the man who had shown her a strength no alien had ever seen. The morning sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a warm golden light across the desert plains of Alaris Prime. The wind carried the soft hum of the hover horses grazing in the fields. Princess Kayla awoke with a sense of curiosity she had never felt before. Yesterday had shown her that Elias Kane, the human she was married to for peace, possessed a quiet, unassuming strength. Today, she was about to see a different side of it, a side no alien had ever witnessed. After breakfast, Elias led Kayla to the homestead's small hangar, where a convoy of human cargo ships waited. "We need to check the supplies for the trade run," he said. "Some of the parts are fragile, some are tricky, and the route through the asteroid belt can be tricky if we're not careful." Kayla raised an eyebrow. "Fragile? Tricky? What do you mean?" Elias smiled. "It's all in the details, Princess. You can see trouble coming if you pay attention." The cargo ships were simple but sturdy. Their design was functional rather than elegant, made to survive the unpredictable hazards of space rather than impress with technology. As the ships lifted into orbit, Kayla felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had traveled through space countless times, but seeing humans navigate the dangers of deep space was something new. The convoy soon approached a dense asteroid belt, a twisting mass of rocks and debris stretching across the void. Sensors blinked red as the ships moved closer to the cluster. Kayla's people had relied on highly advanced AIs and shields to navigate such dangers, but Elias did something different. He studied the patterns of the asteroids, observed the tiny shifts in their trajectories, and made adjustments to the ship's paths with nothing but intuition and experience. Kayla watched in astonishment. The human ships danced through the asteroid belt like they were alive, weaving between the rocks with precision and grace. How are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elias glanced at her, calm as ever. "Humans have a way of reading situations and reacting quickly. You get used to thinking on your feet." It was not just his skill that amazed her. It was his confidence, his patience, and his ability to remain calm when everyone else would panic. A small rock shifted unexpectedly, threatening to knock a cargo ship off course. Kayla held her breath as Elias calmly redirected it with a subtle adjustment to the controls. The danger passed, and the ship sailed safely through the asteroid cluster. "Humans are remarkable," she admitted quietly to herself. "They do not rely solely on technology or rules. They rely on themselves." By the time they cleared the asteroid belt, Kayla's respect for Elias had deepened. But the surprises were not over. As the convoy moved closer to a small mining colony on the edge of the belt, an unexpected problem arose. A supply container had become jammed in the docking bay. The human workers looked at each other nervously, unsure of how to proceed. Elias approached without hesitation. "Let's take a look," he said, rolling up his sleeves. Within moments, he assessed the situation, used a combination of levers, counterweights, and careful calculations, and freed the container. The miners cheered quietly, amazed at how quickly he solved a problem that had stumped them for hours. Kayla's antennae twitched with excitement. This was the human strength her people had underestimated. Intuition, quick thinking, and a natural ability to solve problems without relying on advanced technology. That evening, Kayla and Elias stood on the observation deck of the lead cargo ship, looking out at the glittering stars. "Your people, they have never seen this kind of strength," she said softly. Elias shrugged. "It's not about being stronger or smarter. It's about staying calm, thinking ahead, and trusting yourself. Humans have had to survive in harsh environments for centuries. You get used to relying on your mind and your instincts." Kyla considered his words carefully. Her people valued intelligence and power above all else, often relying on machines and laws to control outcomes. But here, in the vacuum of space with the dangers of the asteroid belt behind them, she saw that humans had something different, a strength born of experience, courage, and ingenuity. The next day, the convoy reached the mining colony. The alien workers greeted Kayla politely, but with caution. Her presence was expected, but Elias's reputation had already spread among the colony. The humans respected him, and now Kayla saw why. A sudden problem arose. The colony's main communication array had malfunctioned, cutting off contact with the outside world. The Xerian engineers scratched their heads, relying on complex algorithms and codes, but nothing seemed to work. Elias stepped forward. He examined the array carefully, testing circuits and rewiring components with basic tools. Kayla watched in awe as he worked, explaining each step to her quietly. "Sometimes," he said, "you don't need the most advanced technology. You just need to understand how things connect and respond. Then you can fix almost anything." Within hours, the array was restored, sending signals across the galaxy. The alien engineers could hardly believe their eyes. They had relied on advanced technology for decades, yet a single human had solved the problem with simple logic, observation, and practical knowledge. Kayla's admiration grew. Every day with Elias revealed a new facet of human strength. It was not in brute force, not in overwhelming firepower, and not in rigid intelligence. It was in creativity, patience, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. She realized that her marriage was no longer just a political arrangement. She had married someone whose strength could truly change the galaxy. Later that night, Kayla and Elias shared a quiet moment on the ship's deck. The stars reflected in the twin moons above, and the gentle hum of the ship's engines created a peaceful rhythm. "Elias," Kayla said, her voice soft, "I thought I married you for peace, for duty. But I see now that your strength, it is unlike anything I have ever known." Elias looked at her with a small smile. "It's not about being better than anyone else. It's about doing what you can, trusting yourself, and helping those around you. Humans have learned to survive in ways that aren't always obvious. That's the strength I have." Kayla nodded slowly. She realized that her people might never understand this human way of thinking, this human resilience. But she could see it, and she could feel it, and it was awe-inspiring. As the convoy continued toward the outer rim, Kayla observed the interactions between humans and aliens. Whenever a challenge arose, a blocked path, a miscommunication, or a sudden technical failure, Elias calmly led the solution. He didn't command with authority or demand respect. Instead, he inspired trust, showing that human ingenuity could achieve what even advanced alien systems struggled to do. That night, as they rested under the alien sky, Kayla thought of the Xerian cluster, of her strict upbringing, of the endless rules and regulations. She realized that the galaxy was full of surprises, and the most surprising thing she had ever encountered was the man beside her. She had married for peace, but she had found something more, a living example of human strength, patience, and intelligence, a strength no alien had ever seen before, and she understood, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning. The twin suns would rise again, and the convoy would face new challenges. But Kayla felt certain of one thing. With Elias by her side, humanity could meet any obstacle, navigate any danger, and achieve what her people had thought impossible. For the first time in her life, she felt excitement not for protocol or duty, but for discovery, for learning from a human, for witnessing a strength that defied expectation, and for the possibility that peace could be built not on fear or force, but on trust, respect, and ingenuity. And somewhere deep in her heart, Kayla knew that the universe had just begun to see the true power of humans. The stars sparkled above the floating space station, a crescent of silver light against the endless black of space. The station itself was shaped like a giant horseshoe, spinning slowly to maintain artificial gravity. Ships of every size and species were docked around it, humming quietly with energy. Today, the station would host a peace summit, a gathering of diplomats from across the galaxy, and Princess Kayla, the Xerian bride, would attend with her human husband Elias Kane at her side. Kayla adjusted the folds of her robe nervously. She had spent years preparing for negotiations, practicing her expressions, her tone, and her etiquette. But Elias, as usual, appeared entirely relaxed. He leaned against the rail of the observation deck, hat tilted back slightly, watching the docking bay with interest. "You're calm," Kayla said, a hint of amazement in her voice. Elias shrugged. "Being calm helps you think. People expect humans to panic in these situations, but it doesn't help anyone." Kayla smiled slightly. There was a quiet wisdom in his simplicity, a reminder that human strength was often hidden in unexpected ways. Inside the station, the atmosphere was tense. Delegates from dozens of worlds had arrived. Their forms varied, some with 6 arms, others with luminous skin, and one species that seemed almost entirely made of crystal. Kayla felt their eyes on her as she entered, curious, skeptical, and guarded. The aliens murmured among themselves, casting sideways glances at Elias. They had heard of the human, of his calm demeanor and clever solutions, but many remained unconvinced that a single human could navigate such a complex gathering without formal power or advanced technology. The first session began in a vast chamber, its walls made of transparent material that allowed a view of distant nebulae. Delegates presented their points in long, intricate speeches, citing complex laws, economic treaties, and historical claims. Kayla noticed how tense the room became as each alien tried to assert dominance. Elias, by contrast, spoke only when necessary. He asked clear, simple questions that made people think, and he offered solutions grounded in practicality rather than rhetoric. Where others relied on intimidation or elaborate protocols, Elias relied on observation, understanding, and clever reasoning. At one point, a delegate from the Vargan system interrupted Kayla, pointing out a potential flaw in the human-Xerian trade agreement. His tone was sharp, condescending, and meant to embarrass her. Kayla's heart raced. She had been trained to respond with precise counters and carefully measured words, but before she could speak, Elias stepped forward. "Let's look at it from another angle," he said, calm and confident. He drew a simple diagram on a holopad, showing how the trade routes could be adjusted with minimal disruption. "If we move shipments slightly, everyone gets what they need without delay. It's not perfect on paper, but it works in reality." The room fell silent. Aliens whispered among themselves, some frowning, others nodding reluctantly. Kayla realized what she had already suspected. Elias's strength was not in dominating others with speech or technology. It was in making solutions work where rules and machines failed. By midday, tensions had grown. Delegates began arguing over resource allocation and station maintenance. Kayla felt the familiar weight of diplomacy pressing on her shoulders. But Elias remained calm, walking among the delegates, listening carefully, and offering small adjustments or clarifying misunderstandings. His human perspective, simple yet effective, began to shift the mood. Kayla watched him closely. Every time a problem arose, Elias addressed it calmly, with clarity and ingenuity. Where her people would have relied on authority or technology, he relied on understanding, creativity, and trust. Even the most skeptical delegates began to pay attention, realizing that the human's approach worked. During a break, Kayla approached Elias quietly. "Your methods, they confuse them, yet they work. How do you do it?" Elias smiled. "I listen. I watch. I figure out what people really need, not just what they say they want. Humans have learned over centuries that survival depends on understanding others and thinking ahead. It's simple, but it's powerful." Kayla nodded, her mind buzzing. She had trained her whole life for diplomacy, but she had never encountered a method so straightforward yet so effective. It made her question everything she had been taught. The afternoon session brought a new challenge. A sudden system alert announced that the station's power grid was under strain due to increased traffic and energy demands. Lights flickered briefly, and a faint hum of alarms echoed in the corridors. Delegates murmured anxiously, some demanding immediate action, others pointing fingers. Kayla felt a knot in her stomach. In Xerian protocol, a system failure of this magnitude would have caused panic, strict orders, and possibly even a shutdown of proceedings. But Elias simply walked to the control center, examining the panels with calm precision. "This isn't a problem we need to panic over," he said. "We just need to reroute the energy, balance the load, and coordinate a few minor adjustments. Nothing we can't handle." Kayla followed him, watching as he directed engineers and station staff. Using his intuition and careful reasoning, he balanced the energy flow, preventing any major disruption. The lights stabilized, the alarms ceased, and the delegates looked on in astonishment. Afterward, Kayla took a deep breath. She realized that Elias's strength was not just personal, it affected everyone around him. His calm, creative approach reassured others, built trust, and solved problems before they could escalate. No alien technology or law could have achieved this as effectively. As the day wore on, the summit continued smoothly. Kayla found herself relaxing for the first time in years. She observed the delegates, noting how Elias's presence encouraged cooperation rather than conflict. The human way of thinking, simple yet clever, was influencing the galaxy in ways that Kayla had never imagined. During a quiet moment in the observation deck, Kayla turned to Elias. "Do you realize what you've done today?" she asked softly. Elias shook his head. "I just helped where I could. The rest, well, that's what humans do. We adapt, we improvise, we trust ourselves." Kayla smiled. Your strength, it is unlike anything the Xerians or any other alien have ever seen. It is not brute force, not control, not technology. It is you." Elias chuckled lightly. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just how we survive. Humans have had to find clever ways to handle problems for centuries. You see it today, but it's nothing new to us." Kayla's admiration deepened. She had married for peace, yes, but she had discovered a living example of human ingenuity, patience, and calm. A strength that no alien had ever witnessed, and one that could change the galaxy. As the summit concluded, delegates shook hands, exchanged nods, and began to leave, some still skeptical, but many clearly impressed. Kayla felt a surge of pride, not just in herself or her diplomatic skills, but in Elias, the human who had quietly transformed the entire summit with his presence and insight. Later that evening, Kayla and Elias returned to the observation deck. The station floated silently against the backdrop of distant stars, the twin moons casting soft reflections across the hull. She watched him carefully, feeling a sense of wonder and reassurance. "You know," she said, "your strength. It inspires trust. The aliens may not fully understand it, but they can see it. They can feel it." Elias smiled. "That's the best anyone can hope for. You don't have to convince everyone. You just have to show them what works, and they will follow." Kayla nodded, her heart filled with hope. She realized that peace was not just a product of treaties or rules. It could be built on trust, understanding, and the quiet, steadfast strength of a human. That night, as they looked out over the stars, Kayla reflected on everything she had seen. The summit had been a trial, not of weapons or power, but of trust, creativity, and patience. And in every moment, Elias had proven that humans had a unique edge, a strength that could solve problems no alien technology or law could. She leaned slightly on his shoulder, watching the twin moons rise higher in the sky. "I married for peace," she said softly, "but I have found something more. I have found strength, courage, and wisdom in you." Elias chuckled, tilting his hat back. "And I married for peace too, I guess. But today, we've both learned something new. About each other. About the galaxy." Kayla smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, and perhaps new dangers. But tonight, she understood something vital. With Elias by her side, she had discovered the true meaning of human strength. Not in force, not in fear, not in rules, but in trust, ingenuity, and calm determination. And she knew, deep in her heart, that the universe had only just begun to see what humans were capable of. The floating space station, shaped like a giant horseshoe, rotated slowly against the dark canvas of space. Ships of every size and design docked along its arms, some gleaming with polished metal, others rugged and practical. Today, the station was alive with activity. Delegates from countless civilizations had arrived for the Galactic Peace Summit. Their goal, to resolve disputes over trade routes and resources without conflict. Princess Kayla adjusted her silver robe nervously as she followed Elias Kane through the docking corridor. The human was calm as ever, his hat tilted slightly back and his long coat swaying with each step. She had spent years preparing for negotiations, mastering every protocol and speech. Elias had no such training, yet somehow his presence radiated confidence. "You don't seem nervous," Kayla whispered. "Why would I be?" Elias said with a small grin. "Getting nervous doesn't help anyone. You watch, you listen, and you figure things out." Kayla blinked. Somehow, his simplicity made sense. Humans were different from her people. They relied on intuition, observation, and action, rather than rigid rules or technology. Perhaps this was the human strength her people had underestimated. Inside the main hall, the chamber buzzed with tension. Aliens of every shape and size filled the room. Some had glowing skin, others multiple limbs, and a few seemed almost translucent. Kayla noticed their eyes flicking toward Elias. They had heard of the human who had solved impossible problems without advanced technology, but many were skeptical. How could a single human navigate such complex diplomacy? The first session began. Alien delegates presented elaborate arguments about trade rights and resource allocation, using complex laws, histories, and technological claims to support their positions. Kayla listened carefully, aware of every word, every tone. Some delegates tried to intimidate her, using rapid speech, sharp glances, or cultural displays of dominance. Elias, however, did not react. He remained calm, observing the room. When a debate reached a standstill, he spoke, simple, clear, and precise. "If we consider the routes differently," he said, drawing a diagram on a hollow pad, "we can move shipments faster with less risk. It may not follow tradition, but it works." The room fell silent. Delegates whispered among themselves. Some frowned, unwilling to abandon tradition, but others nodded. They could see the sense in his plan. Kayla realized something remarkable. While the aliens relied on rules, protocols, and technology, Elias relied on logic, observation, and creativity. And it worked. Midway through the session, a Vargan delegate interrupted her sharply. "Princess Kayla, your agreement seems flawed. How do you justify these trade terms?" Kayla's mind raced. She had been trained to respond with complex counters and formal language. But before she could speak, Elias stepped beside her. "Let's take a closer look," he said calmly. "If we adjust the routes slightly, every participant gets what they need. It may not follow every regulation perfectly, but it works in practice." He moved his hands over the diagram, showing simple connections and clear reasoning. The delegates stared, some skeptical, some impressed. Kayla's heart raced. Elias had diffused the tension with clarity, simplicity, and calm. No alien could match this approach without rules, machines, or authority. During a break, Kayla walked with Elias through a quiet observation deck. The stars glittered in the distance, and the soft hum of the station filled the air. "Your methods? They confuse them," Kayla said softly. "But they work." "How?" Elias shrugged. "I listen. I watch. I figure out what people really need, not just what they say they want. Humans have survived by adapting, thinking fast, and trusting each other. That's all." Kayla nodded. She had spent her life in formal diplomacy, yet she felt she was learning more from this human in a single day than from all her training combined. The afternoon session brought new tension. The station's power grid began to strain under the heavy traffic and energy demands. Lights flickered briefly, and soft alarms echoed through the hallways. Delegates murmured anxiously, some demanding immediate intervention, others blaming each other for poor planning. Kayla felt her pulse quicken. In Xerian protocol, this situation would have caused panic, strict orders, and possibly a shutdown of the summit. But Elias remained calm. "This isn't a crisis," he said, stepping toward the control panels. "We just need to balance the energy flow and coordinate adjustments. Nothing we can't manage." Kayla followed him, watching as he directed engineers. His calm explanations and clever adjustments restored stability quickly. Lights returned to normal, alarms stopped, and the delegates looked on in surprise. Elias's approach, practical and human, solved a problem that complex systems and strict protocols could not. Afterward, Kayla took a quiet moment to reflect. Elias's strength was not just in action, it inspired others. People who had been anxious now trusted him. The room no longer bristled with tension. Instead, delegates listened and adapted, seeing the effectiveness of his human approach. As the day wore on, Kayla observed more of Elias's methods. When minor disputes arose, he resolved them with humor, insight, and patience. When schedules conflicted, he proposed practical compromises. Slowly, the summit's atmosphere shifted. Cooperation replaced hostility. Respect replaced suspicion. And Kayla realized that Elias's human strength, his calm, creativity, and trust was changing the minds of aliens who had never encountered such abilities. During another break, Kayla spoke with him again. "Do you realize the effect you've had today?" she asked. Elias shook his head, smiling lightly. "I'm just helping where I can. Humans have always solved problems like this. It's how we survive." Kayla considered his words. Survival, yes, but also influence. Elias was showing that human ingenuity, patience, and calm could achieve what technology, authority, and rigid rules could not. He had transformed the summit without confrontation, without force, and without arrogance. By the evening, the final session concluded. Delegates were shaking hands, exchanging nods and quiet praise. Kyla felt a sense of relief and admiration. She had witnessed firsthand how Elias's human approach could resolve disputes, build trust, and create solutions that no alien system had anticipated. Later, Kayla and Elias returned to the observation deck. The station floated silently, stars sparkling around them. She leaned slightly on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence. "You've shown me something incredible," she said. "Your strength, it inspires trust. Even when they don't understand it, they can see it." Elias chuckled. "That's the best anyone can hope for. You don't have to convince everyone. You just show them what works, and people follow." Kayla smiled, her heart filled with hope. Peace, she realized, was not just about treaties or laws. It could be built on understanding, ingenuity, and the quiet strength of a human who could remain calm under pressure. That night she looked out at the stars, thinking of her home planet and its strict protocols. The summit had tested her, but more importantly, it had tested Elias, and he had shown what humans were truly capable of. She realized that the universe had only just begun to understand the power of human adaptability, patience, and creativity. She leaned on Elias again. "I married for peace," she said softly. "But I have discovered something more. I have discovered strength, courage, and wisdom in you." Elias smiled, tilting his hat back. "And I married for peace too. But today, I think we've both learned something new. About each other, about humans, and about how simple solutions can solve complex problems." Kayla felt a spark of excitement. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, perhaps unforeseen obstacles, but she was no longer afraid. She had seen the human way of handling trials. Calm, clever, and steadfast. With Elias beside her, she knew they could face anything, not with weapons or power, but with trust, ingenuity, and determination. The twin moons of Alaris Prime reflected in her eyes as she whispered, "The universe has only just begun to see what humans can do." And somewhere deep in her heart, Kayla felt certain that the human strength she had witnessed today would shape the future in ways no one, alien or otherwise, could have imagined.